Continuing along, and this will probably be the final part of the Romeo and Juliet analysis, or the passage analysis that we went through in class. And where we left off, the friar had come up with this grand plan of, Romeo faking her death with this potion, and he sent her off to do so. And one of the things he instructed her to do was to kind of pray and beg for forgiveness for the sin that she has committed, which is where we pick up that night, and we see her doing that. She says, where I've learned me to repent the sin of disobedient opposition, to you and your behest am enjoined by Holy Lawrence to fall prostrate here to beg your pardon. She falls to her knees. Pardon, I beseech you. Henceforward, I am ever ruled by you. And she's asking for forgiveness for this disobedient opposition, where she's disobeying and opposing or going against her father's wishes in taking part in this marriage with Paris. Where, with that being the case, nowadays I feel like it's kind of like, cool or edgy to kind of stand up to your parents and say like, no, boomer, like, I'm doing this. But, in this day and age, respect was a big thing for parents. And if they kind of told you to do something, you kind of did it. And we could kind of see that in the response that the father gave her when he kind of went off on Juliet, and how he felt that Juliet was kind of standing her ground against him. Now, Juliet goes on to say, my dismal scene, I needs must act alone. Come, vial. She holds it out. What if this mixture do not work at all? Shall I be married then tomorrow morning? No, no, this shall forbid it. Lie thou there. What if it be a poison, which the friar subtly hath ministered to have me dead? But ultimately, she drinks it. So she's feeling nervous, she's feeling anxious, she's almost having second thoughts, like what if this is a poison, what if it doesn't work and I have to marry Paris? All of these thoughts, which are probably normal when you're about to drink something that's going to make you look dead for a long time. But ultimately, despite, all of these feelings that she has, she drinks it, and it works. And the next day, the nurse comes in and she's kind of excited, and for good reason, it's wedding day, she's about to get married. Mary and amen, how sound is she asleep? I must needs wake her. Madam? 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 Hi, let the county take you in your bed. He'll fright you up, I faith. Will it not be? What? Dressed in your own clothes and down again? I must needs wake you. Lady? 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 Alas, alas, help, help, my lady's dead. Oh, well a day that ever I was born. Some aqua vitae, ho! My lord, my lady! And, the nurse goes in to wake her up, and she's kind of like, if you can imagine, like, poking her, like, Juliet, Juliet, wake up, like, Juliet, come on. Until she finally realizes, Juliet's, and I'm using quotations, you can't see it, Juliet's dead, which really she's faking it. And this news obviously spreads to the rest of the family, to then which, the father has an interesting response, especially given the context of, what he last said to her. And he says, despised, distressed, hated, martyred, killed, uncomfortable time. Why camest thou now to murder our solemnity? O child, my soul and not my child. Dead art thou. Alack, my child is dead, and with my child my joys are buried. Which is interesting, because if we were to just take this alone, it kind of seems like, he's a caring father. He really cares about her. But given the context of what he just said to her, where quite ironically, one of the last things he said to her was that he never wants to see her again if she refuses to get married. Which is kind of messed up, which begs the question of, even if he meant those things and he's not the most supporting father, doesn't he still have the right to be sad? Is this a genuine response? Good questions to be asked. Now, this news gets to Romeo, but not in the way that it's supposed to. So, Balthasar, one of Romeo's servants, and he's kind of like a friend of Romeo, he's a very minor character, sees that a funeral is being set up for Juliet and sees her there actually at the funeral, but he's not in on the plan, so, he rushes to tell Romeo that Juliet is dead. And he says, then she is well and nothing can be ill. Her body sleeps in Capel's monument, and her immortal part with angels lives. I saw her laid low in her kindred's vault, and presently took post to tell it to you. Oh, pardon me for bringing these ill news. No matter. Get thee gone, and hire those horses. I will be with thee straight. Well, Juliet, I will lie with thee tonight. So upon hearing this news, Romeo, makes this kind of big choice of, I will lie with thee tonight. He's going to kill himself. He can't fathom living without his love, living without his Juliet, so he won't anymore. And he says to himself, I do remember an apothecary, and hereabouts he dwells, which late I noted. And an apothecary is someone who makes potions or medicines, but also perhaps makes poisons, which poisons have been referenced, or death by poison rather, has been referenced a couple of times, leading up to this moment. So potentially you can kind of see where this is going. So he goes to the apothecary, and the apothecary calls out, who calls so loud? Come hither, man, I see that thou art poor. Hold, there is 40 ducats. Let me have a dram of poison, such soon speeding gear. Such mortal drugs I have, but Mantua's law is death to any that utters them. The world affords no law to make thee rich, then be not poor, but break it and take this. My poverty, but not my will, consents. Now, he has this poison and he admits to it, but he doesn't want to sell it to Romeo because it is against the law. But it's noted that he's poor. He doesn't have a lot of money, so he's able to get the apothecary to agree to sell him this poison if he pays him money. To which the apothecary says, my poverty, but not my will, consents this. Which, the way I look at it, it's kind of like he's saying, my heart says no, like I shouldn't give this to you because I know it's wrong. I know what this poison is capable of doing. But in my head, it's like I got bills to pay. I got money. Like I need money. I need to afford things. So he ends up giving him the poison. Now, that message was supposed to be sent, right? But it wasn't. Now, in the interpretation of the movie, it wasn't delivered because of, the post office. But in the original text, it happened a little bit different. And we find out how. And Friar Lawrence hears Friar John coming back. And if you remember, Friar John was the one who was supposed to deliver that message of Juliet's fake death to Romeo. So Friar Lawrence says, this same should be the voice of Friar John. Welcome from Mantua. What says Romeo? Or if his mind be writ, give me his letter. Friar John says, going to find a barefoot brother out, one of our order, to associate me here in this city visiting the sick. In finding him, the searchers of the town, suspecting that we both were in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors, and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua there was stayed. So something held him up. Friar John had went to go find another friar to go associate him to help him, to basically just go with him. And that friar was visiting the sick people in the town, but they suspected that the friars were in a house where the infectious pestilence was, basically a disease. So as a result, and a weirdly relevant thing to do, they were quarantined. They weren't allowed to leave, meaning the message wasn't able to be delivered, which Friar Lawrence is starting to understand. Who bare my letter then to Romeo? Which Friar John says, I could not send it, which is probably the most plain English you will see. To which Friar Lawrence now starts panicking because, he realizes Romeo's really going to think that Juliet is dead. And we pick up in one of our final passages at the tomb, where both Paris and Romeo have gone for different reasons. Paris has gone there to kind of pay his respects of sorts, there to spread flowers on her grave, whereas Romeo has gone there, as we mentioned, to go through with this plan of killing himself, so that he can be with her. So he gets there and he gets, to the tomb and says, thou detestable maw, thou womb of death, gorged with dearest morsel of the earth. Thus I enforce thy rotten jaws to open, and in despite, I'll cram thee with more food. He's comparing this tomb to a mouth that holds the dearest morsel of the earth, that being Juliet, the best thing the earth has to offer. And he's going to cram the mouth with more food, that being himself. He's going to add himself into it when he kills himself. Now Paris is there and sees Romeo, and he hides away in the distance. And he says to himself, This is that banished haughty Montague that murdered my love's cousin, with which grief it is supposed the fair creature died. And here is come to do some villainous shame to the dead bodies. I will apprehend him, stop the unallowed toil, vile Montague. So here, he's saying this to himself. And what's interesting is Paris believes that the cause of death of Juliet is the grief that she suffered from Tybalt dying, which in a way would make Romeo responsible because he's the one that killed Tybalt. And, after he notices that it's Romeo and he thinks that Romeo is responsible for her death, he jumps out and says these lines here. Stop thy unallowed toil, you vile Montague. So he kind of confronts Romeo at her tomb, to which Romeo kind of has an interesting response. Fly hence and leave me. Think upon these gone. Let them affright thee. I beseech thee, youth, put not another sin upon my head by urging me to fury. Oh, be gone. By heaven, I love thee better than myself, for I come hither armed against myself. Stay not. Be gone. Live, and hereafter say a madman's mercy, bid thee run away. Basically, Romeo's telling him, get out of here, man. And the reason is, he says he doesn't want to commit another sin, which the first sin he already committed was killing Tybalt. And he doesn't want to do something like that again, which I guess Romeo thinks if Paris stays, he's going to force him to kill him. So it's leave, because I don't want to kill you. And he says, I love thee better than myself, for I come hither armed against myself. So he's come here to harm himself and only himself, no one else. So he's begging Paris to get out of there. But Paris refuses. I do defy thy combination and apprehend thee for a felon here. To which they fight. And in this fight, Romeo finds himself victorious. In other words, Paris dies. Which is pretty sad. And for Paris, sometimes I feel like it's wrong place, wrong time. Because he doesn't know about all this extra stuff that's taking place kind of behind the scenes. But even still, he dies. And after doing this, Romeo, continues on with his plan where he gets to Juliet's body and says, Will I set up my everlasting rest, which is essentially death, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh? Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, hold you the doors of breath. Seal with a righteous kiss a dateless bargain to engrossing death. So he's basically saying, eyes, look one last time. Arms, take her in for one last embrace. Lips, do one more kiss. And he kisses her and takes out the poison. Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide. Thou desperate pilot, now at once run on. The dashing rocks thy seasick weary bark. Here's to my love. And he drinks the poison. Oh, true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. This with a kiss, I die. Which is really sad, because he drinks the poison and as mentioned, they work pretty quickly. And Romeo dies there next to Juliet. Which the most tragic part of this story is that very shortly after, Juliet wakes up. And the friar shows up, because if you remember, the friar wanted to originally meet there with Romeo, to take them away to Mantua. And when the friar gets there, he sees Romeo's dead, and Juliet sees that he's dead, and he tries to come up with a plan B as fast as possible where he can still get her out of there, but she kind of develops the same mindset as Romeo, where she doesn't want to leave. She wants to stay there and die with Romeo. And she says, after the friar exits, What here? A cup closed in my true love's hand? Poison, I see, hath been his timeless end. O churl, drunk all, and left no friendly drop to help me after, I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them, to make me die with the restorative. And she kisses Romeo. Thy lips are warm. Now she's a little bit frustrated with Romeo in a weird way, where she's like, Romeo, you drank all the poison and you left nothing left for me? And she tries to kiss him to see if any poison is left on his lips, but there isn't. But one thing she notices is that his lips are still warm, which reveals that short amount of time between Romeo killing himself and Juliet waking up, whereas if she would have just, or if Romeo, would have just waited a little bit longer, they could have been together, which again is why this is so tragic. They were so close. And she goes on, "Oh, noise," she hears people coming, "then I'll be quick. I'll get a knife. My body will be your sheath. Rust inside my body and let me die." And Juliet stabs herself with Romeo's dagger and dies. So in this scene, all Paris, Romeo, and Juliet die pretty much consecutively. And from here, obviously the bodies are discovered, and people are confused, because they see Paris's dead body down there, they see Romeo's dead body down there. They thought Juliet already died, but now she's dead again, kind of in a weird way, so people are confused. And the friar has a little bit of a sense of guilt, to which he comes clean in a long passage that isn't in here, but basically in it, he just explains, everything that has taken place, the plan and why they went about it the way they did. He comes clean about everything. And the prince, who's like the law enforcement, the police chief in the movie, says, "Where be these enemies? Capulet, Montague, see what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love, and I, for winking at your discords too, have lost a brace of kinsmen. All are punished." Which, right here, this prince, the police chief, the law enforcement, is blaming their deaths on the hatred that exists between these families. And he's saying that the heavens and the gods almost played a mean trick on them to kind of teach them this lesson about hate, where they used love as a mean to kill their joys, their kids, and to teach them this lesson about what hatred brings. So in a weird way, the kids were sacrifices. Now, Capulet says, Juliet's father, "Oh, Brother Montague, give me your hand. This is my daughter's dowry. I can ask you for nothing more." Montague responds, this is Romeo's father, "But I can give you more. I'll raise her statue in pure gold. As long as the city is called Verona, there will be no figure praised more than that of the true and faithful Juliet." And Capulet says again, "The statue I will make of Romeo to lie beside his Juliet will be just as rich. They were poor sacrifices of our rivalry." Which that idea comes up again, the idea that they were sacrifices. Which, yes, maybe perhaps they're ending this feud, which ironically Friar Lawrence agreed to marry them to end the feud, but it ended up being their deaths that ended the feud. But the question is, should it have come to this? And is a golden statue enough to make up for losing their children? I think the answer is no. To where maybe this hatred, which, again, we kind of talked about this in class, maybe they don't even know why they hated each other, caused them to do these things that led to a lot of people dying. So, these are all of the passages that we talked about in class. Obviously, you weren't able to get all of the analysis and the back and forth that we did, but this is better than nothing if you weren't here. So here it is. So between this and watching the movie, I do believe you should have a pretty good understanding of the story.